So fantastic. So now everyone can see his screen. So welcome both Malik and Mitch to Chicago DNN Users Group. Thanks very much for joining us this evening and telling us about the system. I know that that there's been some buzz in the DNN community about this, and that you guys were at DNN Kahn in Florida, West Palm Beach in Florida in November, and to present a little bit about what we're going to be seeing tonight. We're going to be getting some of the highlights from that, I'm sure. And of course, there's been some blogs, and there's a case study that's available, and so there's a lot of good information that you've put out to let people know about how they too can handle heavy loads on their DNN sites through your experiences. So thank you for that. Tell us about it.
All right. Well, first of all, we really appreciate you inviting us to your group, and we're happy to be here. My name is Malik Kahn. I'm the founder and CEO of Point Click Technologies. We're a managed hosting provider. We've been hosting DNN websites since around 2004, 2005 timeframe, and really started our company back in 2007. Um, our primary focus is around higher end customers that need high throughput or security focused. So this deal here came through a referral that called. I guess the owner of Budget Challenge contacted another developer, telling them the issues they were having with the current host, and they said, well, I don't know, but you can maybe call Malik and see if he can help. So during my talk with him, I just asked him a bunch of questions, and you know, he told me how many resources he had. The success of this whole project wasn't really around um, the hosting provider or the infrastructure or little things like that. It was a process that kind of made it work. So after about 15 minutes of talking with the customer, I told him, you know what, I'm gonna have to give you a call back. So I called another colleague, and they recommended that maybe you should call Mitch and chat with him about it. So that's what I did. I called Mitch, and Mitch has such a good process in place. So as soon as I told him what was going on, he says, okay, for me to help, I'm going to need, actually he didn't need, he says, I'm going to demand that you provide, we're going to need these following things in place before I'll touch it. So we'll touch on some of those items that he demanded that he had to make sure that we can properly troubleshoot and scale and achieve the results that the customer was looking for. So this presentation is one that Mitch actually used back in November at the DNN day of what is it, DNN Con? Yeah, DNN Con
Kahn,
in
yeah.
yeah, West Palm Beach. So it has a lot more details than mine did. So we're using his because what I did in my presentation was a live demo of scaling 10,000 users with the audience. So we were able to show the server setup, what was changed, how we tuned IIS, how we tuned DNN, and things like that, and then fire off a load test with 10,000 users simultaneously hitting the website for the audience. So we're actually planning on doing a webinar probably next month, where you guys are more than welcome to join and actually see that same demo that we did to kind of give you a little bit more details, log onto the servers and show you how to kind of troubleshoot issues, because this project really, the biggest problem was bad third-party modules, or not properly coded to scale. And using some of the techniques that Mitch recommended, we were able to he was able to figure out what exactly was causing the problems, remove those, and we were able to scale the site at very high throughput. So I'll just move on the slide here. Well, Mitch, if you want to talk about yourself here, and I added another slide just about me and some details there on how to
Okay.
contact.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I'm Mitchell Sellers. I'm CEO of Iowa Computer Gurus. Been doing a lot of work with DNN for a long time, and one of the big things that I've been working with a lot, blogging about, talking at conferences and everything, are high performance sites. You know, you sometimes hear people giving DNN a bit of a bad rap when it comes to performance. And most of the time, it's just little tweaks, little things that need to be done, a little bit of planning for that beforehand. So it's one of the areas that we do a lot of work with, as well as you know, a lot of custom development and everything. All my contact information is here. You know, one of the big things, I apologize, my voice tonight is a little raspy, and hopefully will hold out the whole time here. I got a little bit of a cold at the moment, but if you have questions, if there's something that we don't cover today, or something that we talk about that maybe you want a little bit more detail, or need a second set of eyes on, all of my contact information is here, as well as Malik's. You know, reach out to us, and we'll gladly kind of help point you guys along the way.
Awesome. And that's just information on how to contact me. Like I said, I've been involved with the community since 2004. You know, our company is Point Click Technologies, and really, as a managed hosting provider, you know, you can get infrastructure from anybody. The thing that we bring differently is how we help facilitate and help the customer really make sure that they achieve what they're looking for. So, like in this case, you know, when the customer had his previous host, he had to do a lot of, you know, the facilitation and working with other vendors and doing the testing himself. Once we got involved, you know, he just had to sit there and wait for email updates. So me and my team, we worked directly with Mitch, and the same thing with Mitch. You know, he didn't have to, you know, the customer didn't really have to do much with him. We worked directly together and just kind of, we understand what the problem was, and we delivered what, you know, how to solve the problem. So that's really the differentiation that we bring to the table. My email address and Twitter, and how to contact us through our website. Mitch, your disclaimer there, if you want to go through that.
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, one of the biggest things here is we're going to talk about some of the things that we did. Every situation is different. The budget challenge situation and some of the things that we're going to talk about, and some of the specifics that worked in the case of what happened and what we did and what was beneficial and not. You know, it's something that needs to be taken care of on a case-by-case basis. Following a methodical process, et cetera, is something important. One of the things that we'll talk about here a little bit is there's a white paper that I've published and been maintaining since I think somewhere around the lines of 2007, maybe 2008, that talks about some just general performance settings within DNN. Those settings are almost exclusively safe, but there's these rare edge cases where something does go wrong. So even if something looks really simple, make sure to follow good practices when it comes to managing sites. Make sure to keep track of what you changed, take backup copies, test and retest along the way. You know, the number one thing that we don't want to ever see is with any of the guidance and things that we give in talks like this is somebody doing something that causes a problem to just, you know, become even worse than what it is today. So just keep that in mind throughout anything that we're talking about here.
Yeah, I'll be happy to type that up right in the news story that's going on our website. That for those that are watching this recording, before they click, they'll remember that. And we're big proponents of that as well. Jim and I have been building websites for many years, and there's a lot of people out there that well, and rightly so, think that a website's easy to put up and start running, because of course many of us told them that. But when it comes down to it, it's a software system with many moving parts, thousands to millions of lines of code, and going in and making changes to things need to be done in a methodical way. So we certainly appreciate that too. So we'll put that right up there so that people know that when they're watching this, don't just go jumping in and clicking on this thing that Mitch said to click on without doing the appropriate backups and knowing what you're doing.
All right, so quick agenda that from Mitch is just quick stats on what was configured as far as the environment, and then he'll go over some other details on finding the sweet spots, areas that you need to focus on. and just general making improvements as you go along with your project. So for this particular customer, when he told us what exactly he was looking to achieve, so based on the initial results he was getting, Mitch got that data and suggested, okay, let's configure these servers with XYZ number of resources. And as we, ran some load tests, every time we run, we'll see how much CPU was being used, how much RAM was being used, and then we scaled everything up until we thought, this would be a good place for us to achieve the results. So the final place we got to was 5 web servers with 24 gigs of RAM on each web server and 16 CPU cores. There was a single database server in the back that had 32 gigs of RAM and 32 CPU cores. And these are all virtual machines running on top of a Microsoft Hyper-V environment that we run in our data centers. So some of the issues that we ran into was just lots of bad third-party modules, and Mitch will go into some of those details. So some of the tools we used the CDN, and we partnered with a company called Encapsula for that to help offload some of the traffic. Encapsula also does web application firewalling. So in this particular case, because we're storing sensitive data, H&R Block demanded that we have some security in place. So with that, we also Encapsula does some web application firewalling and protect you from SQL injections, cross-site scripting attacks, and things like that. And some of the tools that Mitch demanded that we have in place, one of them was New Relic, which is a fantastic tool that he used to kind of figure out what was causing problems and why the site was failing whenever we got to a certain point with concurrent users. And then the other thing that he demanded was the customer at the time was running DNN Community Edition. So, we had to upgrade that to Evoke. That way we can leverage the caching that it had in place. And the company we used to do the load testing was, we worked with a company called Loadstorm. So that's where we would put, all the simultaneous users, which all it does, it spins up a bunch of servers around the world using Amazon Web Services and just hammer away at your website. And it's very effective and very, very robust testing tool.
Yeah, and one of the things, too, that I think is good here, just real quick before we move to the next one, we've got the peak noted here that basically in the environment, our final environment where we peaked, when we started, the very, very first baseline load test that we completed failed at just a hair over 120 users concurrently. So our end difference, without changing any hardware at all, just utilizing the CDN and some of the other things, we went from sub 500 users to over 50,000 just with tweaking the application and a lot of the different kinds of things. So just to kind of give a little bit of an idea of kind of where things started at and where we managed to get to all the way at the end.
That's remarkable.
So Mitch, I don't know if at this point, sorry, if at this point you want to switch the slide over to your end so you can control, because I think the rest.
Look here. Yep, I think. Yep, that'll work out if we want to switch over to me now.
All right. Well, let me take care of that for you.
Okay, thanks. Any questions from the people, or should we wait till the end?
No, and in fact, folks, just jump in if you want to ask a question along the way, but I don't see anything right now. And
Okay.
I'm really curious. I mean, how far you'll go with naming names, or the quote unquote bad modules, the third-party modules, or for that matter, just to understand the parameters involved with a website a module and what it needs to be able to do and how you can actually go in there and tweak it. So I'm very interested in hearing those things.
Yeah, definitely. As much as, I guess, first and foremost, can you guys hear me okay?
You're cutting in and out a little bit.
All right, is it any better now?
That's a little better. A little higher would be better.
All right. Hopefully this will hold out. So as much as I would love to share the specific modules in question and things here, I have a list of module vendors that are better than others. I have a list of module vendors that are far worse than others. In terms of professional courtesy, I do not want to share that information. I do every time that I become aware of a performance issue with a particular vendor's module. What ends up usually happening is I fix the module on that client's installation. I provide the fix to that vendor at no cost. It's my hope that they integrate those fixes. Most of the time they do not. However, I encourage them to make those changes in their applications along the way. Anything that we can do to help with some of that type of stuff is good, but it does vary a little bit. And do you guys see a blank desktop right now? I'm just trying to figure out what monitor it's shared.
Yes, you see a very nice car and towing a beautiful little plane.
Okay, perfect. All right. Yeah, it's my other hobby. All right. So where I want to kind of go from here is really how we go about taking care of the performance tuning process. And the most important thing, and this is what we do with Budget Challenge, and this is what we do with every single optimization project that we work on. And what we do there is we work on a methodical process. What we want to do is we want to basically do as much as we can to optimize as early as we can, and we want to basically focus on the low-hanging fruit. Basically, find your most exhaustive resource. What is slowing things down the most? Fix that. Move on to the next one. And that is exactly what we did with Budget Challenge. Over the course of the time when we took Budget Challenge from sub 500 to over 50,000 concurrents, it was done over the course of 2 weeks. I don't even know how many late nights it was. I know that it was over the 4th of July holiday weekend. I'm pretty sure we were up and doing load testing around 3 a.m. on the 4th of July. And what we were doing each time, found something big, changed it, redid the load test, found another one, redid it, and did our next step. Following a process like that works. The other thing, and this is something that we did not have the luxury of doing with Budget Challenge, but it's something that I really recommend everybody doing. Start out in a smaller environment. We were testing from day one in a 5-server load balanced environment. That's a lot of hardware. It's a lot of money. But we had to get to 50,000 concurrents. As of right now, we have a potential of having up to 120 to 130,000 concurrents hitting that same site, starting actually with this week. So we knew that we had to just kind of start big. Those load tests are expensive. So if you start smaller, basically you can expand from there. A lot of your problems are going to be visible even in the micro. You just have to be looking at them. So what are some of the things that we're looking for? What are some of the big red flags that we see? And these are some of the things that we saw day one with the Budget Challenge site. If you look at a hosting environment, if you look at a server and what people will say, whether or not your server is healthy or unhealthy, one of the big things that you get is if you see a server sitting at 99% CPU, everybody knows that's bad. But one of the things that we try to do is any site that we optimize, at the peak load that we need to be able to handle, we don't want any server being greater than 70% for anything longer than about 5 seconds. And the reason for that is we want to be able to handle the load that's expected and still have available resources. If we need to support 50,000, we don't want the site to fall over at 50,001. We want it to be good until 52, 53, 54,000, just in case. The other thing is memory limitations are huge. We want to look for two things. We want to look for high memory usage. We want to kill that. The other thing that's really common, especially if you're using a lot of off-the-shelf DNN modules, again, certain ones more than others, if we see a large memory sweep in an application. So if it starts out and it's at 120 megabytes, goes up to 700, goes back to 300, goes up to 900, goes back to 400. If you start to see some of that, that's a sign of something that we want to work with, okay? So these are things to keep an eye on. Now, what happens here would dictate some of the time. This may point out to now we need to go into a load balanced environment. If we just can't serve the load we need to serve and stay underneath these limits, maybe we need to throw another server into the mix. Maybe we need to up the number of CPUs. Maybe we need to up the memory within our environment. A couple things we can do there. Some other things that are most commonly overlooked, and this is something that's overlooked by almost every hosting company out there. It's overlooked by a lot of the ASP.NET developers, and to my knowledge, it is absolutely positively nowhere documented in some of the DNN documentation. And what these areas are, request queuing is the number one thing that basically kills your site and you have no idea that it's going wrong. So what happens is websites can, as part of the response to the user, give a successful response, but it takes longer. So a page may take 2 seconds to respond to the user and you see nothing wrong. Request queuing is a case where 10 people came in and made a request, but the server can only do 5 things at the same time. So 5 of those were sitting waiting for one of the other ones to finish so then it can move on. We want to look for that. If we see request queuing, if we see that the server is doing that, that's something we want to fix right away. Because if we can fix queuing, we instantly fix performance to the end user. The other thing is that in high load situations, configuration of IIS and ASP.NET is something that we really need to look at. How is our worker process configured? When do we have memory limits? Do we have CPU limits? In the end, we also have some high-level ASP.NET activity. Can we make it use more threads? Can we make sure that it's utilizing the resources that are available to it? We also want to look at, is the site incredibly heavy to where it's using a lot of images in CSS that maybe we could put off on a CDN? In Capsula, in the case of Budget Challenge, resulted in, with simply changing the CDN, a gain of almost 15,000 concurrent users by simply integrating the CDN for static content. So what we need to make sure of is that we know that a web server can only do X amount of things over a specific period of time. So if we can make the web server have to do less things to do the same net result, we reduce load. Okay, and connection limits are something here. I'll have a reference to a blog post with that a little bit later. So what are some of the things that we want to be starting to look at in DNN as well? You know, where might we start to look at? Well, we might look at caching. This is something where about content really comes into play with a page output caching. If it's a static page and users aren't logged in, we can do an amazing bit of work here. Scheduled jobs. Default configurations of DNN have things like the search engine scheduler running every 30 minutes to reindex your entire site. That can wreak havoc on very large sites. How is your skin put together? How is your site put together? I'm going to talk about that in a little bit when I demo one of the tools that we use as part of this process. Modules, hands down. When you're picking a third-party module and you're wanting to support a high-volume site, pick a reputable module vendor, check the vendor out, submit a support ticket to them before you buy, ask them if they've done any load testing, ask them what they've done to make their module work for you in your situation. If they come back and tell you that they haven't done any load testing, move to another vendor. It's just something you need to do. Because it does take planning to be able to work in a high-load environment. Within the DNN application then as well, number of users and some of these other things can come into play a little bit more. But what I want to get into now is really what we need to do in terms of making the processes. You know, what do we do to do this methodically? Okay, start with the simple stuff. The important thing here is there are some things. You go in, you check 3 different check boxes, and you make a night and day difference with DNN sites. Our average first run performance review of a website is something that we bill clients about an hour's worth of time, usually result in around 30 to 40% improvement in page load. It's simple. It's a couple check boxes. It's a restart of the application, and it works. But even with the small stuff, still follow the process. Change one item, very few exceptions. You can do a small group of items that are related, but make a change, document them, retest, and then repeat that process. Because the thing is you may start to get to combinations. You may get to where if I check this option and uncheck this option, then all of a sudden things have slowed down. So be methodical, use a scientific method, make a change, test it, and then make another change and test it. So what do we do? What are all of the different things that we ended up doing with DNN and optimizing to make things work in the budget challenge situation? So the first thing we did, we just configured DNN for the best performance. So we used everything right out of the best practices guide that I publish and maintain. We followed those to the T. Those items were kind of the first things that we really worked with. That got us a good leap. The next thing that we moved on to is we worked on the skin. Funnily enough, with the skin, we are able to get pretty major improvements simply by ensuring that all of the images that were used were as small as possible, ensuring that the structure of the site was as clean and simple from an HTML perspective as possible. And then lastly, we started to look at the number of HTTP requests. Was there something that we could do to make it so that it did not take 10, 20, or 30 different things to make a site load? We then had to dive into modules and caching. Caching is the DNN core perspective, turning that on. Modules, we actually had to swap out modules. We had to remove a few modules, optimize database queries on a few others. And I'll show a little bit here how we use some tools to poke into some of that. What I want to start out with, though, first is how your skin can end up coming into play with the performance. One of the things that's most commonly unknown by individuals is that when you work with a web browser, your web browser can only request between 4 and 10 resources from the same domain name at the same time. So what this means to you as a website vendor is if you have a complex installation, if you have a complex design, and there are a large number of JavaScript files and image files and all of these other things that come together, it may not actually be that .NET Nuke is taking forever or that your database is taking forever. What it may be is that simply the browser's limitation makes something take longer. So one of the tools that we use to start looking at skins and how sites are put together is a tool called Fiddler. It's a free tool. And what I did here is just before this started this evening, I used Fiddler to take a look at our local television station's homepage. And when you look at the local TV station's homepage, it is one of those ones that takes a really long time to fully load. So I'll go ahead and just bring it up here real quick. You can see here that by the time it fully loads, it's a couple seconds. I had just been here, so it loaded a little bit faster. But you can see that it loads. You want to look at what the performance is, but I want to look at what it took to load just the HTML, the stuff that goes out to the database. You can see here that this line right here is 1 second. So this right here is around around 25 or 30 milliseconds, so almost no time at all. But all of the other things that it had to load, all of the images that it had to load, the Google Analytics script that it had to load, the embedded images from the news stories, and some of the ad tracking through doubleclick.net, etc. As you can see here, you can see them in groups. First, we download the HTML, then we grab some JavaScript, then we go and grab the next bunch of things. Nothing else happens until we can go and do another one. So you can see how the timeline starts to stagger out. Took us less than a tenth of a second to grab the actual visible content, but then now we're getting the images and the styles. Okay, we're stretched out. We're at a second. Now we're out to 2. Now we're out to 3. Now we're out to 4. By the time we got all the way done, we're all the way out here to over 9 seconds. So the total page load is 9 seconds. You can see here, there's around 222 HTTP requests were necessary to download everything that came as part of the site. There's a couple other little random things I think that snuck in on this one, but there's all of these HTTP requests, and they contribute to the length of time that it takes your page to come up. So when people look at impact to servers, the server is impacted not only by serving the page, but it has to serve the image. It has to serve the CSS. It has to serve the JavaScript files. And that is where a clean, well-designed skin, something that doesn't have a lot of extra bloat, something that doesn't have a lot of extra styles that are unneeded, will be the case. Not to say that anything is inherently wrong with off-the-shelf skins, but one of the number one things we see when we start to look at performance using Fiddler, we see that off-the-shelf skins typically perform far less speedily than a custom skin that only has the visual style elements that are necessary for your website. So something to take a look at, right? We can look at our skin, we can look at what it's doing. This can be stuff that's fairly simple to take care of. You can move some images around, move some images to a CDN. There's a number of different things that you can do. And that's where really we can start to look at ways of basically reducing that stress. And we know we have a ton of HTTP requests. So what can we do? Go out and utilize a CDN to take care of the things that you need to do. The other thing that is possible, and I am going to remind everybody of the disclaimer from the beginning of this talk, again, the recommendations in the article that is linked here. This is something for people that know what they're doing. If you are not a developer, get with a developer, get with your hosting company, get with somebody else before you try to make these changes. But I will tell you, the settings linked in this IIS optimization, this is what took us and gained us almost 20,000 concurrent users. With the same hardware, the same DNN installation, nothing changed other than making some configuration changes. What these changes are changes in the default way that ASP.NET works, changing the maximum number of things that it can do at the same time, the maximum number of items it can work on, and substantially increasing those numbers. It works well, it works in the environments, but you have to make sure that you know what you're doing and you understand the ramifications of what could happen to other things. In case of Budget Challenge, we were working in an environment where the only thing that was being served by these servers was the Budget Challenge application. So with that, it's something that makes it really easy for us. We were able to, take care of the nice, easy fixes and really make sure that we can move things along. So the other thing that Malik mentioned is he mentioned our usage of New Relic to help us with optimizing and understanding exactly what's going on in the various environments. And I cannot stress how much I like New Relic enough. I hate promoting third-party tools in any talk. I'm not being compensated by them in any way for this. It's something I have to make sure to mention as well. But this tool was a godsend for us. every time we were making a change, every time we did a load test, this is the main dashboard within New Relic. This is actually live real time right now across all of the servers in the Budget Challenge farm. And it gives us a lot of very important statistics around what's going on in the environment. We've made a couple changes in the Budget Challenge app recently, so there's actually a few things in here that I don't like. We're working on getting them taken care of. But we can see here, just at a quick glance, on the average response time to the user, which right now our average response time to the user is 139 milliseconds for a page load. Pretty good. But what we can see here is that right now, the page load time and the responses to the user, the green, the blue, and the yellow show us which elements and how much time they actually contributed to that response. So we can see that our database is the most costly, the .NET language, which is all of your .NET new custom modules, third-party modules, right? All of those things, those are represented by the .NET CLR. And then we have that pesky request queuing thing that I told you about. We can see here that we are suffering a little bit of a queuing penalty right now, around 20 milliseconds a request. 20 milliseconds isn't a lot, but it's something that we want to make sure that we get away. We want to tune that back out so that we don't have any delays. And that's where we're going to, again, look at making sure that our CDN is doing what we want to do. The other thing that we can start to see here is we can start to look at, how busy are we overall? How many requests a minute are we handling into the farm? How many, what are our servers looking like? What's our CPU usage across our servers? We're in a load-balanced environment. We want to make sure that our load is being evenly distributed. So we should see that almost all of our servers should be showing similar CPU usage, similar throughput. This server is actually not in the farm right now, which is why it's a little bit low. But we should be seeing consistent metrics. If we don't see something consistent, this is going to give us instantly a red flag. You can go take a look at it. One of the other big things, if I want to optimize something, this transactions view shows me what's the most costly transactions that have been occurring in this past sample period. Okay, if I want to optimize something, guess what? I think this student home vendor selections.aspx page, I think that's my one I want to optimize. This is where tools to exaggerate and exemplify where a problem lies, this is what gives you that tool, this is what gives you that item to move forward. And that's what you want to be able to do. I now know what's going on. That page is taking time. Let's go take a look at it. And that's where having these types of tools, this is where everything goes really, well. You can start to see here too, what's our most expensive database queries and how much time and how much relative impact do they have. The last piece, and this is something related to a blog post that I've actually already made, but it was actually something that was discovered as part of Budget Challenge. There was a performance issue with 51 degrees and the device detection routines in DNN. Come to find out, the website was making calls out to their site, and when we were load testing our site, we were actually impacting 51 degrees. It was then slowing down everything. We were able to catch this because this also times and tracks external calls. So if your DNN installation goes out and grabs information, one of the things that we found is a fairly popular third-party module, every 30 to 45 minutes, was making a request to validate the license. Under heavy load, that license request process was slowing things down to where we were getting errors because it was taking 15, 20, 30 seconds to respond. So there's a number of different things, and it's all about taking individual steps and verifying things kind of, one at a time, making sure that you know exactly what you've changed, where things have changed, and what might be impacting it. Find the slow pages, find the slow modules, and then you have to get it again from there. I don't know, Malik, anything you want to add?
Yeah, not really. I think, like you said, it was just a process that we followed, and working together really well, and just making sure we document, follow, retest, until we were successful. And the time frame given was just so short that we had to spend a lot of those overnight hours to just accomplish
Yeah.
what the customers.
And actually, that makes me remember the one thing. The thing that made this situation special for us is we were working with Malik, and he was the one in charge of the hosting environment. If you are load testing and you're hosting your stuff at a third-party data center, contact your hosting provider before you start your load tests. One of the things that we've seen a lot of in the past year is people trying to do load tests. They fail miserably, and it's not because the sites are horrible. It's because they didn't notify their data centers, and the data center sees unusual activity, shuts it down because they think it's a denial of service attack. We took Budget Challenge on the point-click servers that were only being visited by us, and then we threw 50,000 concurrent people to it. If they wouldn't have known that was us, they would have shut us down. So make sure as you're working through these situations, make sure that you are communicating to all of the parties involved. If you have third-party integrations, make sure the integration vendors know what's going on as well. It's part of that communication process in terms of making sure that everybody's aware of exactly what's going on. Any questions or anything, any particular area? We wanted to kind of give a quick overview of what we did and some of the steps that we followed. Like I said, it's all about looking step by step, but is there any particular specific questions that anybody has that we can answer?
I do have a couple of things that I'd like to pass on to you. The first one has to do with the skin. I thought it was an interesting concept. You were saying how many of the purchased skins have all kinds of bells and whistles, and all of that stuff is being brought in to bear every page load when it's not. Many of the capabilities aren't being used. So the alternative you suggested was, it sounded like making your own skin, but is it also possible to use some of these tools that you were pointing out and get a store-bought skin and then remove some things?
Yeah, you definitely can. Just to kind of illustrate a little bit here, I just actually loaded the Iowa Computer Gurus site and traced it here with Fiddler. Ignore the fact that I apparently have a dead link in my own skin, but with proper caching and proper skin development, it only took 5 HTTP requests to load the entire Iowa Computer Gurus site from cache. Now, it's not going to be as fast for some of the original ones, but that's just where, setting cache durations and some of those other items can definitely help. You can modify any skin to reduce some of that overhead. The only thing is that sometimes it gets more costly to circumnavigate what was done before than it would be to do from the ground up. Some skins are much better than others. Some of the skin developers now that are using like theme builders that are built into them, those ones end up being a little bit nicer usually, because a lot of times, unless you put the stuff in from their theme builder, it may not actually put in all of that overhead and some of that stuff is loading and hidden behind the scenes. So you definitely can. It just truly depends on the skin, the site, content structure, what you're trying to accomplish, and the other thing is too is how cooperative the skin vendor is. We've worked with a couple skin vendors. In fact, with Budget Challenge, the skin vendor made the changes for me that we needed to the skin. We did not even have to do them ourselves. So it really just depends on the vendor you're working with.
Ah, fantastic. Okay, good to know. The another question I've got is in regards to the load testing. Your site has multiple functions, and you have to walk through a process. So, is the load tester? Do you basically write some kind of a script that says, to emulate your typical user, to be sure that all of these functions are happening. And then once that happens, are you then you assume that the load tester is coming in at random times so that you have a nice even, one guy is just starting up while another person is halfway through the process while a third person is finishing, that kind of stuff?
Yes, and uh-oh. All right, well, apparently I don't remember my login information to my Lodestorm account, because I was going to show you guys, but, well, boy, that's not good. All right, so yes, what you can do with each of the load testing tools are going to be a little bit different. There's two key things to look at with load testing tools. There's two types of load testing tools. There's tools like loader.io, blitz.io, etc., where basically you just give it a URL and it requests it. It doesn't do anything else. It doesn't load the images. It doesn't load anything else. Those are great if you know that your problem is actually in your .NET code, because it only loads the .NET code. It does not actually load your CSS and your images and other things. Tools like Loadstorm, you can do things with Loadstorm one of two ways. You can actually go into Loadstorm and just say, okay, grab this URL, and then it will go out and say, okay, if I grab this URL, I'm actually downloading the HTML, and I'm downloading these 3 CSS style sheets, these 300 images, and whatever else. And then what you can do is you can set up, okay, page 1, page 2, page 3, and then you can say, what I want you to do is I want you to simulate a user that visits all 5 of these pages, and they randomly stay on a particular page between 10 and 40 seconds. And then basically when you say, and I want you to do that with 50 users, it will create 50 users that run through that 5-page process with a random wait in the middle repeatedly for the duration of your test. So you can simulate that. With Loadstorm, you can also basically browse it yourself in Chrome, save off your browser history using the Chrome developer tools, and then upload it to Loadstorm, and then it does it all from there as well. It can do things like login, so you can actually have it log in as a user, you can have it create a user account. You can really simulate testing pretty much any portion of your application with the various tools that are out there. But the key is that you want to build a scenario that is similar to that of what you were working with. With Budget Challenge, for example, we knew that the people that were going to be getting to the site and the load that we were worried about were promotional visitors. So people that H&R Block would have been promoting, hey, go to the Budget Challenge site. So we knew that for the most part, right, they would come into the site, they would go do a couple of things, and then they'd hit the registration process. So our load test scenario that we ran through with those 50,000 users was basically simulating people doing that exact process.
Got it.
So it's testing to your scenario. It's always good also, if you have multiple scenarios, you can test both of those scenarios at the same time. So making sure that you don't optimize maybe for registration and impact existing users, or something of that nature.
Right.
So you have a lot of flexibility with those tools, and each situation is ever so slightly different in terms of what makes the most sense for your particular organization.
Oh. One other question I have, and I'm sure both of you can answer it, but it falls under Malik's probably scope at least, and that is the tuning up of IIS. You figure that a hosting vendor is going to supply a Windows environment that is pretty much would work with anybody, because you don't know what the person is going to be putting on there, whether they're going to be putting on a DNN site or one of the other types of content management sites, or a completely different application. So, but once you know that it's going to be a DNN site, would you be able to do the kinds of tuning that Mitch is prescribing in his documents, as well as the Tune IIS link that you provided for us in the slide there. Would you be able to provide a DNN environment that is good for at least a larger majority of any DNN site?
Yes, so that is our process. We would take care of all that information, whatever you need, whether it's DNN, Sitecore, or whatever application you're using, even WordPress that we have running on Windows. We'll help make sure that we make all those configuration changes for you. And we even now are offering, before you launch, we'll throw in a few credits of Loadstorm and do actual testing for you, just to make sure that everything would be running as expected.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, and I think that the one thing that's definitely important to note, Point-Click is probably one of, if not the only, hosting company that I know that's actually willing to tune IIS for its customers. I have reached out to a number of other hosting companies, and they have been very hesitant to make these changes because it does require a knowledge at the application level. So I do think it's something that, for me, it was very beneficial working with Malik. That he didn't scream at me and tell me no, I can't do it, and those kinds of things. But it is something that it's a hosting company by hosting company item, and it's also a site by site situation in terms of whether or not it's actually going to benefit a site. So don't be fully alarmed if you're with a different hosting company and they're like, you need to find your own consultant to help you with it, because I think it's something that's still a little new, and is definitely a bit more on the enterprise side of things.
Got it. Well, thank you both very much for this information about how you were able to put this together. Obviously, the expertise that you both had coming into it made the budget challenge system accessible to all these kids. We think it's a great thing. Just the folks that put it together originally, Buten, I think that's how the name is said, that put the thing together, and then the folks at H&R Block came in and said, that's a great idea, let's push this bigger, make this bigger, and then now it's out there for kids to become a little bit more financially intelligent. And the neat thing about it is that it's all running on top of DNN. So I did, when first hearing about it, I jumped on the site, and then of course, I go in and inspect elements and view source to see what little I can see of it. And I noticed that there's some OWS stuff. One of our founders of Chicago DNN has given many tech talks on building applications on top of OWS. So one of the tools, one of the modules that are in there that made all this possible is Open Web Studio, OWS, one of the tools that he recommends. It's a shame that he could not make it here tonight, because I'm sure he would have asked a few questions about tuning that kind of stuff. But the rest of it was fascinating, so we appreciate it. You had mentioned that there is an upcoming webinar that you're going to go into some even more detail and talk a little bit more about the system. When is that?
It'll be next month sometime. We haven't picked a date yet. We just have to redo the environment for the testing. So we'll be working with Mitch to make sure that we get that up, and then we'll let you know the day, but it'll be certainly
excellent. So we'll be posting the video as well as a few links that were in your presentations as part of our review of tonight's meeting on chicagodnn.org. And so please feel free to either jump in and comment on the article that's in there, something to the effect of there's a webinar coming up, and give the date and the time and the invitation to get there. And of course, you can certainly contact us at Chicago DNN, Jim or myself, and we'll be happy to update the the article so that people know about the webinar. And anyone who has been watching what you guys have been sharing with us this evening, if they've been watching it, I'm sure they'd be interested in seeing some more about it and seeing some further demonstration of it in your webinar. So fantastic. Thanks both very much, and get well soon, Mitch. Sorry for bringing you out on the I know you just got back from some traveling, and the this little bug that you've got is one of those things you want to try to get rid of as soon as possible. So best of luck getting that cleared up for yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Not a problem. Life's got to go on.
Very true. Very true. All right. Well, thank you both, and we look forward to seeing that webinar that's coming up. I'm going to switch the presentation back to myself, just basically to put up my my one slide here, and then close out our meeting. We meet on the second Wednesday of every month. Sometimes, let's see, click on that. Sometimes we meet live and in person, so we get a chance to have some pizza and something to drink, and just chat and do some camaraderie, networking, etc. And then many times, because of busy schedules as well as our great Chicago weather, we meet like this virtually. So next month we're planning on a virtual meeting. Hopefully the weather will be accommodating in the months after, so that we could start meeting and having people travel. I'm putting up a calendar up on the screen here so you could see it. And we're going to be meeting on February 11th. That's the second Wednesday of the month, like we meet every month. So we look forward to folks joining us then. And then, of course, if you're watching us, if you would please put a comment in the comment area of our article that we've got on chicagodnn.org. Or if you're seeing us on YouTube, go ahead and put a comment there and let us know what you thought of today's presentation. Also, let us know if you have any ideas for other presentations, what you'd like to know about how DNN works, particular skins, particular modules, how to combine a few things together to solve the particular issue that you have, whether you're an owner of a site, an administrator of a site, or a developer putting something together. Maybe somebody is interested in building a module, and you've got a cool application, a cool way of doing things, and you built it for some other CMS or some other development platform, and you want to know how to do that in DNN. The folks that are at our meetings can help you. So we look forward to seeing your comments on our various social medias or websites. So until next month, there's nothing else from any of the folks that are here. Thank